able to sponsor several more students for our college scholarship. So we want to thank Lydia and all of you. First of all, I'd like to thank the committee members who helped make this evening happen. Alessandra Mazzucato, could you stand up so everybody can see who you are? Nancy Beck. Eleanor Kelly. Dorothea Casalaina. And Lydia will spend some time talking a little bit at first, and then she'll take some questions and answers before she signs the cookbooks later on. Now, I know it's going to be very tempting to flip through the cookbook, but please try to resist the temptation while she's talking so we don't have a lot of rustling of pages. I just want to start out by saying that when Alessandro gathered the program committee together last spring to discuss opportunities for programs at Dorothea's house, I had just come from having dinner with my sister and my daughter at Lidia, one of her restaurants in New York. And despite the fact that that very day Lydia had received the prestigious James Beard Award as Outstanding Chef, she took the time to come over to our table as well as other tables and greet us very graciously. And my sister said afterwards, she said, you know, there's something about her. She said, I don't know what it is because she doesn't look like Mom looked, but there's something about her that reminds me of our mom, and I just had to resist the urge to hug her. And I'm sure that's a sentiment that Lydia hears over and over. And once you meet her or have seen her on her television program, you will all agree. Her warmth and her charm and her sincerity is so effusive, and her desire to make you experience the best that Italian cuisine has to offer, that you know she's really sincere. She makes you feel like your Aunt Giuseppina or your neighbor next door. And on top of that, she's a fabulous cook, a successful businesswoman, and the star of a nationally televised cooking show that we all anticipate every week. And here in New Jersey, those of us who are Lydia-philes are fortunate enough to get our Lydia fix 3 times in one weekend because we can watch her on public TV in New Jersey and the New York station and the Philadelphia station. So from Aragosto to Zabaglione, there is nothing that she prepares that doesn't make me salivate and want to rush to the kitchen and start cooking. But aside from that, in her show, she tries to educate us on the science involved in cooking foods. And that's knowledge that she gained not only at the hand of her relatives in growing up in Italy, but through classes she took early in her career at Hunter College, at Queens College, at the New School in Manhattan, all while running a highly successful restaurant and raising 2 children, Tanya and Joseph. Aside from owning Lidia, she also runs with her son, Becco, a restaurant in New York's Theater District. She's also a partner in the wonderful seafood restaurant Esca with her son and Mario Batali. And away from New York, she owns Lydia's Kansas City and Lydia's Pittsburgh. She's also developed a line of fine pasta sauces called Lydia's Flavors of Italy, and is the founder of Esperienze Italiane, an international tour company that sponsors high-end tours in Italy. And as if that weren't enough, Lydia uses her talents as a chef to organize benefits and rally support for humanitarian causes. She has helped raise funds for organizations like UNICEF and UNIFEM, and founded the Good Samaritan Hospital to adopt and aid victims of the Bosnia War. In 1999, the nonprofit Lidia Matticchio Bastianich Foundation was established to help indigent, abandoned, oppressed, ill, or handicapped people. The foundation has provided help to immigrants trying to integrate into the United States from war-torn Croatia, Albania, Yugoslavia, or other Eastern European countries. This house, Dorothea's house, was founded in memory of Dorothea Van Dyke McLean, another woman who helped newly arrived immigrants from Italy. I'm sure that if Dorothea were alive today, she would be very pleased that we are hosting a program featuring Lidia Matticchio Bastianich. So let's have a nice round of applause, and here comes Lidia.
There's a lot of energy that comes with each clap that goes beyond the sound energy. So I thank you very much for that. It's my pleasure to be here today. It really is. And when we met Linda at the restaurant, and I think we discussed somewhat the house, and I didn't know enough about it. But all I needed to know was that this house. Do you hear me in the back?
Yes.
Yeah. All I needed to know is that there's some that this house supported the Italians, the immigrants when they first came, that it initiated with that, and of course now that it supports and helps young people of Italian descent in their culinary, in their education, culinary, but in their education, in the quest for education. So it's wonderful, and if my presence can generate any movement, any funds, or any energy towards those ends, then I am ready. So it's a pleasure being here today. As I said, I brought my mother and her friend Giovanni, who you've seen on TV. Now let me tell you a little bit about me, even though you seem to know, and if you watch the show, I think you do know a lot because I do share. The show is taped in my house, and that's the kitchen that we just came. We had lunch there today with my grandchildren, and so that and my mother has her own little apartment within that house, her and Giovanni. So it is really real, and when I do take these trips that are somewhere an hour or 2 hour distance, and that she doesn't have to go on the train or on the plane, I take her with me. She loves it. She loves it because she's so much part of it. I mean, she was very instrumental in me doing what I am and becoming what I am, because raising a family and running a business, being a woman sometimes is not the easiest of things. But I'll go a little bit back and just sort of tell you the story. I came as an immigrant. I was 12 years old when I came to the United States. And I was born in Istria, which is no longer Italy. It belongs to Croatia now, so really on the border. And the reason that we did come is because it was given to Yugoslavia then, became communist. And of course, my parents, the ethnic Italians, who couldn't speak the language, couldn't practice the religion, whatever, and they decided to go back to Italy. There was a window of opportunity that the esuli, as we were called, or the exiles, the Italian ethnic exile could leave and go back to Italy. And then that window closed, and the Iron Curtain went down. My parents decided, I guess, to maybe try to stay it out with their own family, their own mother and father, and not leave them. But it soon became evident that they couldn't live that life and certainly could not raise their children, which was us, in that condition. And we actually escaped back to Italy, even though we were ethnic Italian by then, because restrictions were put, the language that we spoke and what you did, and of course it was the communist regimes had set in. We couldn't go as a family because once the Iron Curtain went down, they wouldn't allow you to go back. To leave the country. So my mother, my brother, and myself went as tourists, and my father escaped about a month after. We met again because we had relatives on both sides. Since the proximity was so close, we had an aunt in Trieste and other relatives, and we spent some time with them. But then finding a job, I guess, was difficult. I was at the time 10, so for me, it's what I do recall very vividly is that I missed, because I left, I couldn't say goodbye to everybody, to anybody for that matter, because my parents did not tell me that we were not going to go back as children. We would spill the beans in a sense. So I did say goodbye to my grandmother, to my friends, and I always sort of felt very sort of almost extrapolated out of our situation. So I think I'm saying this because I think in the long term that was the drive that sort of the in me to retain my culture, but to retain it with food. Because if I came here, I was 12, I was fairly young, I was get sort of very Americanized, and I feel very American. I feel quite American, and yet I feel very Italian. And it was this constant wanting to be connected to the culture, I guess, that I was cut off first to ground, whatever, that I used food as a medium. And in turn then, I think I wanted my adopted country to sort of know what my original country was and bring the two of them together. And I continue to do that with food. And for me, it's my media. It gives me a lot of rewards. Besides, I think the culture itself, emotions, and why does everybody love Italy? Why does everybody love to go to Italy? Why does everybody think that the Italian lifestyle is so wonderful? I certainly think that at the bottom of it, the table is a major component. And not the table just because of nutritional or gustatory situations, but because at the table, much happens. Much happens in communication of emotions, of giving, of taking. But also, as Italians, I think that we love beautiful things. You know, you say, why does Italians? We need to see beautiful things, we need to hear beautiful things, we need to eat good things. And I think all of this, and those are priorities that Italians put before themselves, before other things. So their quest, their hard work and everything is for an ultimate end of living well. And I think that in my shows, in my book, I communicate that. And again, food will certainly begin to bring that feeling at home of sort of living well. But so I was 12 when I came. We went to Trieste. In Trieste, we stayed for about 2 years, and we stayed in it was a political refugee camp. It was actually a camp because after we stayed with my aunt for a while, of course, it became difficult for her in the aftermath of the war to support. And by then, I think my parents had decided that even if it was difficult to find a job, that they would move on and migrate and find a new world for their children to grow in. And so we stayed for 2 years in Sasabo was the camp. It was political refugees. And we came here in 1958, and we were brought here by the Catholic Charities. We had nobody here, so the Catholic Charities paid for our trips. They brought us to, they found that, I think we first stayed in a hotel. It was the Edison Hotel on 36th Street in Manhattan. There was a Horn and Heart on the corner. I remember vividly because my brother and I were mesmerized by those machines and the sandwiches we were offered themselves. And I can still remember it was the first time that I tasted grapefruit, Jello, tapioca, and those things are very vivid in there because I guess I was into food as it was from the early, and really I remember those. But this, we really did settle, and actually the Catholic Charities found a home in North Bergen, New Jersey, so we moved to North Bergen, New Jersey, and found a job for my father and a job for my mother. My mother is an elementary school teacher, but of course she couldn't practice that, so she went to work in a factory, and he was a mechanic, and he found a job for I think it was General Motors. But within 6 months, a cousin of ours, a distant cousin who had sort of jumped ship, found out that we were here, brought us to Astoria, Queens, and that's where our sort of life began in America. Went on to junior high school, and began college. And my interest at that time was really not focused on food. It was in the sciences. I liked biology and I liked chemistry. And I thought that I might go in that direction. But I somehow gravitated always towards food. And part-time jobs in bakeries, in restaurants. And then I met my then husband, who was in the restaurant business. And I think that just sort of put things in, maybe that was one of the reasons why we were sort of gravitated toward each other. And at 24, I was married with one child, and I opened my first restaurant. Now, I was always sort of, even I was 16, and I remember that I just always took the bull by the horns. I did what needed to be done, and I didn't, wasn't afraid of it. I think just the whole trip of coming here and in the camp and having to fend for oneself a bit more, because in the camp, I have only good memories. I don't have any resentment at all of my life. I think what I did, what happened, my destiny has really enriched me a lot. So even in the camp, we were in a line, and I remember going in a line for food, and I remember getting my share of spaghetti at pomodoro with a little bit of cheese and an apple. I think that was all ultimately positive for me. But it built the character that I am. So my character is sort of, you fend for yourself in a sense, you make it happen. So at 24, I was not a chef, certainly. I had no official training, and I took it back. I had chefs in my family. My aunt, the one in Lidia, was a wonderful chef, and I spent some time with her. And my grandmother had a little sort of inn before that I can remember, and they produced all the food that we ate, from making algo to making wine to distilling grappa to making prosciutto to drying beans for the winter, to going to the mill for flour. I recall all of those in very young, I was still very young, but I think that was sort of, it built a reference library for me as far as flavors and awareness of taste. So at 24, I had, the direction I'm going to take is basically want to take it to the Italian-American, and what is the difference between the Italian-American food and Italian food, and there is a difference. I realized soon in working in the restaurants that the food that was served in the restaurant was not the food that I ate at home. It was different. And I said, well, maybe, I don't know all the other regions because, I was young. Maybe in the other regions of Italy, this is what they serve and so on. But certainly coming back and seeing it was not. It was a different kind of food. So we hired an Italian-American chef. I became his sous chef. And for 10 years, I professed my profession as a professional chef. But also I learned the Italian-American cuisine, which was parallel. There was Italian elements, but it was not the cuisine that was in Italy. In the meantime, I sort of began to introduce the true risotto, the way we ate it at home, and the polenta, and the gnocchis. And by the time, 10 years after we opened for Lidia, I was my own a chef, and I cooked the traditional food of Italy, and that's what I'm known for. For Lidia opened in 81, there for 22 years, that I'm known as the lady of traditional Italian cooking, and I really hold myself to that because I think that I have a mission, and I feel it almost sacrilegious to sort of forfeit that mission, and that mission is that I need to transmit the Italian culture, the Italian culinary culture in its true form, what the Italian people need, to my other people, the American people. So therefore you say a chef, could be inventive. Yes, I could. I do not venture there. I do not invent. None of the recipes that I have are mine that I invented. They're all part of the Italian patrimony, of the Italian culinary patrimony, and I work with them, I freshen them up, but I really try to bring Italy to my diners. Now, Italian-American. So after I've received my accolades or whatever as the traditional Italian, we went on to Pittsburgh, we went on to Kansas City, and I saw that Italian-American cuisine was alive and well, and people just loved it. And I said, there's a reality here. And I said, I'd really like to pursue that, and that's when I decided I would write this book and put the Italian-American cuisine, or the Italian-American table, and do a little research. And since I had, in those 10 years, I had learned all of the recipes, most of the recipes of the Italian-American, I knew it. I said, I just have to put it in written form that the Italian-American cuisine is a wonderful cuisine, is a very valid cuisine. It is not the traditional cuisine of the Italians that live in Italy, but it is a cuisine of the Italian immigrants and their adaptation in this new country when they came. So I did a little research, and it seems that the first big influx of Italian immigrants came at the turn of the century. And they basically came from two regions, from Campania and from Sicily. And the Italian-American cuisine or recipes really are based on those two regions' cooking. But you can imagine that when those people came at that time, they came here with these wonderful memories of recipes and flavors, but they did not have the ingredients. They did not have the olive oil, they did not have the Samarzano tomatoes, they did not have the pecorino romano or salsa, they did not have the parmigiano reggiano, and therefore, anything that they cooked had to be different, had to come different. Now, let's say I went back to Campania and I went in the homes of housewives, and I said, can you show me, how do you make your Sunday sauce, or the Sunday ragu as this is known here? And it was basically very simple. A shoulder of pork, some onions, some plum tomatoes, some Marzano tomatoes, a little bit of oregano and salt, and cooking of about an hour and a half, some good olive oil, and this was their Sunday sauce. Quite different from the Sunday sauce that we find here in the United States, where the sauce is cooked for 2-3 hours, has a lot of oregano, a lot of garlic, a lot of meatballs and sausages and bracciole, and well, there is a reality there. First of all, the use of meat. These immigrants came because, of course, necessity, and they found the abundance of meat here, so using more meat in their Sunday sauce signified that they lived well, and they used much more. Garlic was one element that was the same in flavor, therefore they found it here. They used a lot more garlic to give it the pungency, the intensity of flavor that they remember back home. They did not have the San Marzano tomato or plum tomatoes, even though the tomato is a New World fruit, but it's in its form more as a fruit, therefore much more watery, much more acidic, so they had to cook it longer to sort of get the density of sauce, add maybe a little bit of sugar. The spices were the same, so your dry oregano possibly that they brought with them, using a lot of that. So there is, you can see a cuisine really transforming out of necessity into a new cuisine. I think it's a venerable cuisine, it's a wonderful cuisine that shows the adaptation of the Italians when they first came and continue. The interesting thing about it is that we are 5 generations removed, and the cuisine is alive and thriving and living well. And I discussed it with some sociologists and I said, why? How, usually things taper off and fade. Why is this culture so persistent? It's almost incestuous in the sense that it feeds on itself from generation to generation. I haven't gotten the answer yet, certainly, but I think it's wonderful to see that Italians, even 3, 4, 5 generations, connect as being Italians Americans through that food. I really, this book is in honor to those immigrants and putting that cuisine in its right place, because the press in the last few years have begun to sort of brandish and saying, well, it's the imposter cuisine, it's not the real Italian cuisine. It's a real cuisine, it's a cuisine of the immigrants. It's not the cuisine that is traditionally Italian in Italy, but it is the cuisine of the Italian and their adaptation in the United States. So the book is doing very well, and people are responding to it, and I'm delighted to have shared that with them. I'm going to open up some questions, because otherwise I can go on and on and on. If you have any questions, yes.
Trieste is in Friuli.
Trieste is in Friuli, yes.
We've been there. We've been to Udine a couple of times. Do you know frico?
I know frico.
Is it possible to get the ingredients and a recipe?
Yes, my second book. you have all the. Frico is traditional. You need Montasio cheese, And it's just a melting down cheese with potatoes cooking in it. And and you know, they used all the rinds of the cheese and all of that, the frugality of a cuisine, using everything. So putting in a big cast iron pot and letting all of that onions, raw potatoes, and this cheese, and just slowly cook for 2-3 hours until it sort of melts into a cake. It is quite heavy and rich, but it is wonderful. I give some alternatives, some options on how to lighten it up in my second book, which is really, actually, it's also interesting because I brought my version back to Friuli, and some of the restaurants are doing it there. So it's quite interesting what part of the Italian experience is going back to Italy. The Italians are picking up, so it's very interesting. But it's a great dish. Any other question? Yes?
I heard recently on the radio, some organization is giving restaurants a kind of a stamp of Italian authenticity. And I thought it was really interesting. I was just wondering if you've heard about that and what your kind of position or take on that is, what your observation is.
I think what the Italians are trying to do is valid. Let's see now with United Europe. One of the things that concern me certainly that these traditional products get homogenized within all of Europe, and that a Parmigiano Reggiano could be made in Denmark and so on. So the Italians are trying to safeguard the DOCG, the origine controllata, and I think that it is almost necessary, because if you homogenize that, then you lost the culture to some extent. In taking that a step further, they're trying to sort of authenticize or give the seal of approval to restaurants abroad. It's going to be an awful difficult task, and I don't know which guidelines would really do justice to something like that. But the consciousness of you know, trying to really do, because everybody's doing Italian food. Italian food is the #1 ethnic food in America, followed by Chinese, Mexican, and then French. I travel around, and as I see, you know, the way the Italian food is interpreted and sold as Italian, sometimes it leaves a lot to be thought about. But I don't know whether that seal will do the trick. But don't bring a consciousness out there. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you find that your friends don't invite you for dinner?
But no, maybe you've noticed I'm a very sort of relaxed person, and I enjoy the simplest of food. So if it's natural, even a piece of bread and cheese, I'll be happy with, and my friends know that. But yes, there is but I assure them right away, you know, don't worry about it and whatever. So I don't know, will you cook today? Yes.
Could you tell us about your son Joseph's wine importations? I'm very interested from your shows.
Yes, we, in my sort of quest, as I said, I was 12 years old, so my quest to regain and to maintain my original heritage, I continue and always need to go back and research, and it takes 3, 4, 5 trips a year, and go to producers and go to up and down the peninsula, just trying to make sure that I am up to date with what is happening in Italy. And with my children, as they grew up, they were always in tow, you know. It's not that, you know, I just left them somewhere, even though I had grandma. They always came with me because I also wanted them to be with me. So therefore, they were exposed, you know, subliminally in a sense, they were exposed to all of this. And I told them when they were going to school, and even during their school years, I told them, this is not what you want to do. You need to go to school, you need to get an education, and that is that. And so they did. My son Joseph went on to Boston College, went on, became an analyst for Merrill Lynch. But then, after a few years, decided this is what he wanted to do. My daughter Tanya went on, she loved the arts. She went on and got a PhD from Oxford in Renaissance art history. And that's where the sort of the trips come in. So they did. They were educators. So for me, that was a great, that's what I needed. That's what I guess my parents brought us here for, and in turn, it was a quest that we needed to do. But then, slowly, they all came back. My son, and that's because, I don't know, because I know why, because their mom was having a great time, and they said, this is a good business to be in. I mean, I was just enjoying it, and I still enjoy it. So when he decided to come in, we said, okay, you have your business savvy now from Wall Street or whatever, you really need to spend a year in Italy. And he did. He went up and down in Italy for a year to work with. But then I had befriended so many producers and all that. Italy was almost every town I knew somebody. And he did a year between restaurants and production of cheeses and wine production, and came back and then worked with me and opened back and so on. But every summer, every vacation, they went back to Italy. So they spoke Italian, so they got very close to Italy. We decided 5 years ago, although we have land in Istria, which is not Italian, we decided to buy again some more land in Friuli, and we bought a vineyard. And about 5 years ago, we started producing wine, and it is his passion. And we have some now in Tuscany. So and he takes his children back. My daughter married an Italian. Their children speak Italian. So it's a continuum. Every summer, they spend a whole vacation with the kids in Italy, in the vineyard or whatever. It is, I think, my growth was not one out of business savvy and wisdom, although you need to have that to sort of keep it going. It was one of seeing an opportunity, an opening, and saying, gee, I have the possibility to do that. I want to do that. And that's how the growth of what I do comes about, with the right people always. Working very close with your family. My business is still a family business. Is I think the greatest rewarding achievement of a parent to have a child follow to a certain extent, and to be a mentor to your own children. It's been a great reward. So both of them, one for the travels, the other one for the winery and restaurants. It's a family business, and that's what we're growing it as. But the wine has been received very well. Received 3 bicchieri by Gambero Rosso already for the second year, and received a 91 rating by Wine Spectator. And I am so proud because it's my son's, even though I'm involved, but it's his spirit in the wine.
It's kind of a follow-up to what you said. I've always loved food, but my interest in cooking didn't start until a few years ago, and unfortunately, Winona wasn't quite able to cook the way she was, when I was very young, and didn't really have the opportunity to learn from her like I would like to. For someone who's not, or doesn't have immediate family in the restaurant business, what would be your suggestion to getting into that type of cuisine? What's the best path to take?
If you had sort of clean slate, what I tell young people is absolutely get an education for yourself, get your bachelor's in something that you love, that you're passionate, that you want to know, humanities, whatever. From then on, go into culinary school, good culinary school. In the interim, you need to spend some time, rolling your sleeves up and hands-on through the culinary school, really getting and working. You need to find mentors who you really, whose work you appreciate, assimilate from them. You need to get yourself to Europe or whichever cuisine you want to emulate, whether it's Chinese or you need to spend some time to understand that cuisine. If it is American, then you need to really travel and see all the different products that you have and the culture of the American. I would say that process would take you ideally, after you go to culinary school, travel in a year would be ideal to be abroad, and at least about 4 or 5 years in the field with people, really hands-on, And then you begin at that point, I think, to formulate your own personality in this industry. And that's what I think gives you strength to success and sort of a message when you understand what you want to do and what are your flavors, almost like what are your colors, what is your style if you're an architect and so on. So that would be it's not a fast, but maybe it's not that long, because all along you do get a lot of satisfaction, and you do make a living, you can make a decent living, and then you sort of flourish. But what's very important is that you find yourself mentors, people that you really believe in what they do, and that they shape you. And then from then on, you have an opportunity to really blossom this life. Okay. Yes.
Yes. 2 months ago, my friend and I went to New York to a theater, so we decided to look up and see if your restaurant. We went to Becco. And I was so impressed by your waiters. First of all, they're not dressed elegant. They have that lovely white apron. They bring the food to the table in the original pan that they cooked it. They explained what it is, how it's cooked. And I just was so impressed. And I said to my friend, that's because Lidia wants it like that. In the past, I go to a restaurant and I'm intimidated by these waiters that, first of all, they don't even know where the fork is, but they look down at me. And if I ask a question, don't you know what that is? And I go, well, I wanted you to tell me what it is. So I just want you to know that I think that's a lovely thing that you
But it says a lot about Italian culture, and that is that, and sometimes it is taken the wrong way, that Italian restaurants, or people that are not Italian, they just sort of, in a way, slap it up or make it easy or whatever. No, Italian is elegant in a comfortable situation. I mean, that's what Italian food is all about. Preparation that's very elegant with prime ingredients, done well, but in a relaxed atmosphere, not in a sort of, because it's the food of the Italian people. If you go back, if you're talking about French, let's say that you refer to French and all cuisine and all of that, those chefs, the birth of those cuisine actually is not out of the food of the populace. It's the chefs of the courts. Now, through Renaissance and so on and before, the courts had these chefs that were invented, to show off their wealth and their monies and whatever. They decorate themselves, their palaces, but also the food to the same growth, where they hire chefs that needed to invent things and make new things and put birds in the pot or whatever. And so that was when the revolution in France occurred. Those chefs had no place to go. Restaurants certainly were not. They began opening their own restaurants with that cuisine, and so the French cuisine does not really reflect the common cuisine, the people of the common French people, which now is becoming ever more evident, that Provençal and so on, which is the true cuisine. In Italy, even though during the Renaissance and all of that happened, but it didn't remain within the Italian culture to that extent. There are dishes, that reflect all of those periods. But the cuisine is still very true to the people that eat it and to the soil that it comes from. And it's a comfortable setting. So I'm glad that you picked that up. Although that also is the first restaurant I did with my son. So therefore, much more relaxed. He was young and whatever. And also, different price points in restaurant business exclude a lot of people. So I thought that I wanted to cross borders as far as price and make my cooking and my flavors available at all price points.
Well, I also asked, I said, you think I could, Lidia will be here? And the waiter said, well, maybe she will. So at the end for these, I said, oh, but Lidia, I never got to, he said, you need to come back another day. So I just was so happy the way he was.
I do travel from restaurant to restaurant, and there are set dates that I'm there, and I think if you go on the website, you'll know exactly when I'm at which restaurant. But I do surprise them. I do go and from restaurant to restaurant just to check on them. Yes.
in view of what you just said, how would you characterize the food of Lidia?
The food of Lidia is a wonderful setting, attention to details in preparation, no limitations on ingredients. When the primizie are out, primizie means the first of, then no matter what it costs, we have it. The truffles, we have it in season. So all the prime things that are not necessary for for an Italian cuisine as a whole, but it exemplifies very much the cuisine of the ultimate cuisine, Italian cuisine. So I would differentiate the fact also of the extensive wine list. I mean, we have always over 1,200 different Italian labels on it. So this sort of the opportunity for a dining experience that is utmost as far as Italian food goes would be Lidia, and then Becco would be wonderful preparations with great ingredients. White truffles I do not have at Becco. When you have although I have the herbs and everything else, but certain primizie maybe I won't have it at Becco as I do in Lidia. The wine list, we have a great program. We have about 60 wines for $20. You see, it's a different philosophy. It's a philosophy of really welcoming for people that want to begin to explore the Italian wine programs and stuff. We have that opportunity because if you begin and you say, gee, Italian wines are the selection is so vast. Where do I begin? You certainly don't want to begin with the $200, $300, $400 bottles. And there's plenty of good $20 bottles out there to be had. So I think that we emphasize that experience and that opportunity. And since we are expert at it, we can make those opportunities available to our diners on different levels. Yes.
Well, could you comment on the Tokai, wonderful wine of Friuli? At least I used to love it when I could get it. Now I've understood that the Hungarians across want to have it called Tokai.
That's right. And we'll lose the name in about 2 years, I think, a year and a half. And Tokai is a geographical place in Hungary, presumably where the varietal of Tokai was first. Although the varietal of Tokai in Friuli, Venezia, Giulia is completely different genetically than the Tokai in Hungary, nonetheless the Hungarians have claimed their right to the name because geographically, like Champagne, you can only name Champagne if it comes from Champagne. Again, going to the DOCG.
Wasn't it true that it was occupied by the Hungarian?
That part was
Austria-Hungary.
Yes, that part was
and
Austria.
they planted the same grapes, but they didn't come up the same.
Yes, well, because the varietal, the grape will respond to the soil, even though it's the same wool. And then the sort of cross on different on different roots will yield a different Tokairo. But yes, that area. And that's what's so amazing about that area is that coming from the border, looking at myself, my cuisine is also interesting because it has the Austrian-Hungarian influence, it has the Slavic influence. I cook the whole area, not just myself. We cook with sauerkraut as well. I make palacinke, I make goulash, which is part of my heritage. And I speak 5 languages. I mean, I was born bilingual, and then we will go on to 3 languages very easy because of that. And I think that some of the good chefs of the world, like Andrei Saltner, whatever, come from borderline situation where you have in your reference library so many more. It's like a painter have different colors on their palettes, so much more. We have those ingredients, and I cook with them. But certainly that area was under the Austrian-Hungarian rule for how many years? It was from the Franz Josef used to have his summer retreat in Istria and in Trieste. Carlotta has the Castello di Miramare. also where they built a beautiful castle. So that area, even if you go now, Trieste is very Middle European, the architecture of Trieste. It's quite interesting part of the world. Yes.
How did you come to have restaurants, Lidia's, in Kansas City and Pittsburgh? And is that maybe a new concept thing that you might bring to Princeton?
Well, the expansion is a lot to do with my children, my son, and wanting to expand. Kansas City and Pittsburgh, the demographic of those cities, we felt different from the big cities that we're going to, Chicago or Los Angeles. Those cities were big enough, 2 million and around there, had a vibrant sort of cultural scene and economic scene, and were underserviced in what we have. And I think we were right. They accepted us really warmly, and it's a lot of work. Let me tell you, finding back and forth, but it's working out well. Yes.
Lidia, you just mentioned before the necessities of Italian cuisine. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? What would you consider are the necessities in a household? And equipment-wise too, maybe.
But okay, let's begin. I would begin certainly with olive oil, with the fresh herbs, with the main starch components, which is the pasta component, the rice component, the polenta component, the cheeses, and diversified cheeses, the Parmigiano, of course, the Pecorino being the two big ones, and then of course all of the soft cheeses from Lombardia, Gorgonzola, Taleggio, and so on, Piedmont. Talking about the tomatoes, which is now essential, although again it's a new world fruit. It only came to Italy after Columbus discovered America, and it developed. So did peppers. Peppers is a new word. So pepper, again, Italian American. Peppers are used much more in Italian American cuisine than we use them in Italy. And that's again when those immigrants came. That was one element that they recognized sort of, and they used a lot of. Going back to the vegetables, the Italian sort of vegetables, the cicoria, because the vegetable families basically are not that different from culture to culture, but there are nuances in how these vegetables are really grown that make a big difference. It's just endless where you go. Any other questions? Yes.
Well, from watching your show, I find I watch it not just for the food, but also the way you move in such a relaxed way, such a joyful way. So for me, it's a kind of stress releaser just to watch it with my friends. The way you throw salt, just right? And it's really such a stress reliever. How do you, though, keep yourself with all your restaurants? I'm just saying that the work is having to travel and fly. How do you kind of keep yourself? You unstress me, but how do you keep yourself
composed? I mean, I do have to, from time to time, pay attention to, I get over stressed, and then I just cut out. I really do. I love nature. I love music and art. I love the water. So sailing really does it for me. But I think that what you see is me being very comfortable with my element and in a comfortable setting. And I just, it is in my house. When I was first asked to do a television show, and that came after I had done some with Lidia Child. I befriended her in for Lidia, she came in, and I said, Lidia, she was doing a show, would you mind doing 2 shows? And I said, of course, I'd love to. And after that, of course, the producers came, you did pretty good, would you like it? And I said, yes, but I have 2 requests. One, that I do it in my home, in my kitchen, because that gave me a sense of comfort and knowing all the elements, I knew where everything was, so that I can talk and project. And the other one was to be on PBS, in that sort of a setting of teaching, because I knew that I wanted to communicate something. It's just beyond you know, how you cut onions and whatever. So it's coming across, and my mannerism, I think it's something, you know, that happens as you develop yourself as a person and with your own sentiments and coming to terms and understanding spiritually, emotionally, all of those things have a play. I mean, I think that food is sacred, you know, as far as wasting food and all that. And I think, you know, people tell me that how I handle food, I need to touch food for me to, food sort of communicates to me what I'm gonna do with them when I touch it, when I touch it. And I guess all that comes across. Unbeknownst to me, it's not that I plan to do that. It's something that happens beyond maybe my cognitive messages. Any other questions? Yes?
I noticed in your kitchen that you have a wall oven. Is that a bread oven or a...
No, that's a rotisserie and a grill. And I used it, I think in the show once or twice. I realized that my quest is for people to do the food that I do. And I know that not many people will have that. So I don't use it as much. You know, it's not about what I have, what I can do. It's about what I can have you do in a sense. So, but it's a great little, it's you know, live wood. It's a griddle, it's a rotisserie too, and then there's a chute, you know, that takes the smoke right up. So, and that little round thing that you see is a piece of metal that you take off, and when you put it on, it reflects the heat back onto what you're cooking. So it's this rounded metal stainless steel cover. Yes.
Just a comment. My 10-year-old son is in love with you. We often have to change the meal based on what you're cooking on TV.
That's wonderful. I get a tremendous amount of emails, and the dearest ones are the ones from young children. I get pictures from them, I get messages, and I make sure that I respond to them.
I will make sure to tell him that.
You tell him that, and I'm going to make the connection here now, remember. So I have 5 grandchildren. I mean, I have 4, 5th one's coming. And I have them in the kitchen all the time. I think that children today are really deprived of the beauty of connecting with food, through
My
food.
children love to cook.
And I'm delighted when I see coming across that I'm actually working on a show for children and using a child as a medium to connect to their parents and all that, and bringing them in and putting things together. So I hope it works out. Yes.
The one basic food that I don't see Italians making in Italy is bread. And I wondered if you would like to see more Italians making their own bread.
I think that the culture of bread in Italy is well in the line. But you have the panificio. And in Italy, what you have the small artisans, which is an art that is not here. You know, what we have here is either you sort of do it yourself at home, or you go to the big stores and big producers. And the beauty of Italy is precisely that you have the small panificio, the salumaio, the nocino, all of these little artisans that are specialists in what they do, and they do it well. So therefore, the necessity of so even in the cities of Italy, you have this sort of artisan product. Although if you go out in the countryside, people still make bread. They still make the brick ovens that they do. Absolutely. Yes.
Have you found much cross-pollination between regions in Italy now?
Oh, no, Italy is still very, very well. I shouldn't say that the cities are not. But the beauty of Italy is its regions. It's precisely from dialects to customs to foods to musics. I still go to Italy, and with all these years, I always find something new in every region. So is it crossing? Yes, I think there's some homogenization happening in Italy as far as food in the big cities. But if you go out of the big cities, the small towns are still very much into their tradition, and it's wonderful. Yes.
I was going to ask you if you ever go out to eat at any restaurants other than Italian, and what cuisine like that?
I do. I love the Oriental cuisine. I love Chinese. I love Thai, Korean. Although it intrigues me, even the Middle Eastern cuisines, the Greek, they all intrigue me. Because when I look, I look into them. Where do I see any connection? Do I see anything similar to the Italian? And probably comparing what does that culture do and how it differs from ours. But the Oriental, I like the Oriental very much. And it's quite similar to the Italian, but I think it's quite.
You mentioned when the Italians first came over here, the Italian-American cuisine built because they didn't have the products they had from back home. As those products became more available in the United States, how did the Italian-American cuisine change as well?
I think that now there's a complete availability. I opened my first restaurant in '71. I couldn't get aglio rice, and if you don't have aglio rice, you don't make a decent risotto. So I had to make risottos with long grain rice, which were just because the long grain rice did not release the starches that were stronger, so you didn't get the creaminess. So I firsthand experienced. So it hasn't been that long that we have. I would say now that we have most of, or if not almost all of the products that one finds in Italy, you could find them here if you research. You would ask, how does the two cuisine? They're still parallel to each other in the sense the Italian-American cuisine, although there is a crossing over of the two, and I think that the two will end up sort of homogenizing at some point and forming. I don't know. I think it's an interesting question. Yes.
Another question on visiting relatives in Italy. It seemed that they were a little bit lax in being cautious as far as refrigeration is concerned. Like it seemed like they left everything out all next day. Is that true, or is it just a misconception?
It is, but there's a completely different threshold of the palate as far as temperature is concerned, and it's one of the problems. Not a problem but Americans like it to extreme, like very cold and very hot. They need to really be sort of stimulated on the top, and I think that you really maximize your flavor of something when you are so closer to your body as possible, maybe a little warmer so you get the blood flowing and whatever, you're more sensitive. But it is a definite cultural difference. Italians do not like ice in their drinks because they're going to get stomachache. It's cultural. It's cultural, but it does make sense as far as your capability of tasting the things, because cold temperature accent the tasting of saltiness and whatever, hot and so on, and room temperature. I like my food at room temperature too. I like my cheese certainly at room temperature. So I retained a lot of that because I can really taste the flavors. So now they did it because that's the way they like it.
Yes. But I think what he was talking about also was, I had this experience when friends came from Tuscany. They made roast rabbit, and the leftovers they did not want to refrigerate. They wanted to leave it out on the counter. This was in the summer, and I was horrified. And then once in their home, they made rabbit, and it was left over. They must have made 2 or 3 rabbits. And for 3 or 4 days, we didn't eat it, but they just stored it in their oven, and they ate it. So I think that's what he was talking about, was that they don't have that sensibility that we have about as soon as it's cooked and you're not eating it in the refrigerator.
Yeah, well, because they didn't have access to the refrigerator, although that no longer is true. There is that food changes if you put it in the refrigerator. It really does. Even if you reheat it, it doesn't taste the same. And that might be one of the, and then consciousness to health, I think that they pay attention. I know that when we did it, we either always covered it with a kitchen towel or with another plate. The concern was of if something is cooked and most of the bacteria is killed, then it should maintain its condition, unless you introduce bacteria somehow again. So the concern was that flies wouldn't introduce anything, although that's not completely true because bacteria get regenerated within itself. So, but I don't remember. I think that we were very conscious of when a food was not good, and it took over, you know, that sort of fermentation but I remember food being left back all the time with another plate on top of it or a thin kitchen towel, and the flavors are maintained closer. Yeah. Yes.
My question is about vegetables. Is it American influence that vegetables are cooked authentic? Because growing up, my mother always cooked the vegetables. But they were not.
Yeah, I think it's a whole movement of nutrition and the validity, you know, of the nutritional value of vegetable, and if you cook it, you lose a lot of it. You're absolutely right. What I remember is cooking this vegetable as a child. The vegetables were cooked not mush, but they were delicious. I just had this discussion with a doctor, and he said, I said, you know, I think we were talking about different nourishments and all that, and we're talking about vegetables, and he says, well, you know, if they're undercooked, you're losing a lot of the vitamin C's and all of that if you overcook them. And I said, fine, but because they're undercooked, because the cellulose is not broken down, you don't assimilate, it just passes you through. So what is the value? You know, if you break down the vegetable and you really are able to get more vitamins out of it because the vegetable has been made accessible to your system to absorb it, or is it that you need more nourishment in the vegetable itself, and then you let sort of your system fend and pull out as much as it can? It hasn't been, that sort of comparison hasn't been made. So even though I'm of the thought, I love my vegetable a little bit more, just when they begin to cross over. I don't like them really olive green, but just when they begin to cross